flames, they weren't supposed to be there. My son's laughter turned into screams, echoing through our quiet suburban street as fire lit up our yard like a war zone. I remember dropping the laundry basket, my knees giving out as I saw him, my little boy, wheelchair tipped over, his arms flailing helplessly while that woman stood there. HOA Karen, dressed in her perfect royal blue uniform, holding a flamethrower like it was some kind of neighborhood toy, shouting, "I warned you about breaking the rules." The smell of burning grass, the melting plastic of his chair, it all blended into one nightmare I'll never forget. If you're watching this, tell me where you're from. Comment your city below. And before we begin this story, hit that subscribe button, because what happened next will make your heart stop. Let's start from the moment everything was still normal. It was supposed to be an ordinary Saturday morning, the kind where the sun feels gentle, the birds sound alive, and everything in the world seems okay. My son, Ethan, was outside in his wheelchair, playing with his little drone in our own yard. The smile on his face made every sleepless night worth it. For once, he wasn't thinking about the surgeries, the stairs, or the pity. He was just a kid, my kid, laughing under the sky. But peace doesn't last long in our neighborhood. Not with Karen around. The self-appointed queen of the HOA, with her clipboard, her sharp tongue, and her obsession with perfection. She had already complained about the color of our mailbox, about Ethan's ramp ruining the uniform look, even about the way he laughed too loud. But what she did that day went beyond anything human. If you're watching this, tell me, what city are you from? Comment it below. I want to know how far stories like this can reach, how far justice can echo. And before we go deeper, please hit that subscribe button, because what happened next changed our lives forever. This is the story of how one woman's hatred turned our peaceful home into a burning battlefield, and how a mother's love refused to die in the fire. The morning started like a quiet promise. The air smelled of freshly cut grass and the faint sweetness of the honeysuckle bush that grew beside our fence. I was standing by the kitchen window, coffee in hand, watching Ethan chase his small drone across the yard. His laughter carried across the sunlight, echoing through the trees, pure, innocent, and free. Ethan had always been my miracle. After the accident that left him paralyzed from the waist down at age 7, every day since had been a fight to keep him smiling. And somehow, he always found a reason. He loved the sound of the wind, the warmth of the sun, and that silly drone his uncle had given him for his birthday. It was his little piece of freedom, something that made him feel like he could fly even when his legs couldn't. I leaned on the counter and smiled. "Don't fly it over Mrs. Wilkins' roses again," I shouted through the open window. He grinned, turning the drone back toward our side of the fence. His wheelchair rolled over the soft grass, the wheels crunching lightly against the gravel path. That's when I saw her. Karen, walking her poodle down the street like she owned the entire block, her royal blue, HOA, uniform pressed to perfection, golden trim gleaming under the sun. Even from afar, I could tell she was in one of her moods, the kind where her lips pursed so tightly you could almost hear her disapproval before she spoke. Ethan froze. He'd seen her too. His hands tightened around the drone controller, shoulders tensing. "Mom," he said softly, "should I go inside?" I wanted to say yes. God, I wanted to protect him from her venomous looks and cruel words. But I forced a smile instead. "No, sweetheart. You're in your yard. You're doing nothing wrong." He nodded, but his eyes stayed fixed on her. Karen slowed her pace when she reached the edge of our property. Her poodle barked twice, sharp, high-pitched yelps that made Ethan flinch. She didn't pull the leash back. Instead, she smirked. "You again," she said, her voice cutting through the quiet morning. "Didn't I tell you about flying that thing around?" I stepped outside, keeping my tone even. "It's in our yard, Karen. He's not bothering anyone." Her eyes flicked from me to Ethan, then back. Our HOA rules are clear about disturbances. Drones, noise, clutter. You've been warned. Ethan's face fell. He lowered the controller, the drone landing softly beside his chair. "I'm sorry," he murmured, almost whispering. I felt anger surge inside me. He's playing, Karen. He's a child. A child Who breaks rules? She snapped. And rules are what keep this community beautiful. Maybe you should teach him some respect. For a moment, the air between us turned thick, like the world itself was holding its breath. Then, as if deciding she'd made her point, Karen tugged her poodle's leash and walked off. But not before turning back one last time. Some people, she said, her voice dripping with disgust, just don't belong here. I stood frozen, fists clenched, watching her disappear down the street. Ethan didn't look up. He just stared at the ground. When I finally crouched beside him, he whispered, "Why does she hate me, Mom?" My heart cracked. She doesn't hate you, baby. She just hates herself too much to see how beautiful you are. He nodded slowly, trying to be brave. But I could see it, that flicker of fear she left behind. We spent the rest of the morning together, trying to pretend everything was normal. I made pancakes while he watched cartoons. Every so often, he'd glance toward the window, checking if she was still out there. I reassured him she wasn't. Yet, deep down, something didn't sit right. Karen's words that morning weren't the usual HOA nonsense. There was venom in her tone, something darker than annoyance. After lunch, I wheeled him outside again. "You can play a little longer," I said, ruffling his hair. "I'll be right inside, okay?" He nodded, smiling faintly, but I could tell he was hesitant. What if she comes back? She won't. I promised, though I wasn't entirely sure. And even if she does, she's not allowed to hurt you. This is our home. Those words would come back to haunt me. The day was peaceful again for a while. Ethan went back to flying his drone, laughing when it landed clumsily on a patch of flowers. He waved at our neighbor across the street, Mrs. Lopez, who smiled and waved back. Birds chirped, wind rustled through the trees, the kind of ordinary sounds that make you forget how quickly life can shatter. I remember standing in the kitchen again, looking out the same window, telling myself everything would be fine. But then I noticed something strange, a movement near the edge of the fence. Karen's car, parked crookedly, engine off. She sat inside, sunglasses on, staring directly at our yard. A chill ran through me. I stepped closer to the window, narrowing my eyes. She wasn't just watching, she was studying. I called out to Ethan, trying to sound casual. "Hey, sweetheart, maybe it's time to come in for a break." He turned the drone back, toward the porch, nodding. "Okay, Mom." I watched as he began to roll up the ramp, but before he reached the door, Karen's car door slammed. She got out, holding something long and metallic. I couldn't tell what it was from the distance. Her movements were rigid, her expression unreadable. My pulse quickened. "Karen," I yelled from the porch. "What are you doing?" She didn't answer. Instead, she walked to the trunk of her car. And that's when I saw it, the large silver canister. A hose. A handle. I didn't understand at first. My mind refused to connect the pieces. But when she raised it and pointed it toward our fence, realization hit me like lightning. A flamethrower. My throat went dry. "Ethan, inside now." He froze, confused. "Mom, now baby go." I screamed, running down the porch steps. The next second, everything that had been peaceful, the grass, the flowers, the laughter, vanished in a wave of fire. The sound that came first wasn't fire. It was a hiss, a deep, pressurized growl that ripped through the air. For a split second, I didn't believe what I was seeing. My brain refused to accept that a neighbor, a woman from the HOA, was standing in broad daylight with a flamethrower pointed at my child's yard. Then came the light. A streak of orange and gold burst from the nozzle, swallowing the air with a roar, so loud it drowned out my scream. The flames poured forward like a living thing, writhing, clawing at everything in their path. The grass turned black in seconds, the fence caught fire, and the sky itself seemed to burn. "Ethan!" I screamed, sprinting toward him. My feet pounded against the ground, each step pulling me closer to a nightmare that felt unreal. He froze, still gripping his wheelchair's wheels, eyes wide, disbelief etched across his small face. "Mom?" His voice was trembling, so small, so afraid. "Move, baby, move." But he couldn't. His wheelchair had hit a patch of uneven soil near the patio, one wheel jammed in the dirt. The flames were closing in, licking the grass, the heat blasting against my face like opening an oven. I dove forward, adrenaline taking over. I grabbed the handles of his chair and yanked with everything I had. The metal burned against my palms, but I didn't stop. I could hear Karen shouting something, her voice shrill, manic, but the fire's roar was louder. You were warned. I told you. I didn't look at her. I pulled Ethan's chair backward, stumbling up the ramp, smoke choking the air. The sound of crackling would fill my ears as the fence behind us collapsed into ashes. We reached the porch, and I shoved him through the door. Go! Into the kitchen. He wheeled himself inside, coughing hard, tears streaking down his face. I turned back toward the yard, heart pounding so hard I could barely hear myself think. The flames were spreading fast. The lawn, the ramp, even the corner of the porch had started to smoke. I grabbed the garden hose and sprayed wildly, but it was useless. The water hissed and turned to steam before it even touched the fire. Stop it, Karen! I screamed, coughing through the smoke. You'll kill him. She stood there, a few yards away, face twisted in fury, her blue uniform reflecting the firelight like something out of a nightmare. I told you your family was a danger to this neighborhood, she shrieked. You bring down property values. You don't belong here. Her words hit like bullets. My mind spun. How could someone hate this much? How could a neighbor, a human being, justify something so monstrous? Before I could say another word, she squeezed the trigger again. A fresh burst of fire erupted, spraying toward the porch. I dropped the hose and stumbled backward, slamming the door shut as flames engulfed the steps. Inside, the house filled with smoke. The alarm blared overhead, shrill and merciless. Ethan was coughing, eyes wide with panic. Mom, the window. We have to get out. I raced to the kitchen, grabbed a wet towel, and threw it over his head. Stay low, baby. Crawl if you have to. I opened the back door. Thank God, the flames hadn't reached there yet. I pushed his chair, through, my lungs burning, outside. I dragged him down the slope toward the neighbor's yard. My only thought was to get him away, far away from that monster. Behind us, the fire roared louder. Windows shattered. The smell of burning would mix with the acrid sting of melted plastic. And through it all, I could still hear her. Karen, screaming something about rules and order, as if this was some kind of twisted punishment she thought we deserved. I turned back once, just once, and what I saw will haunt me forever. Her standing in front of our burning home, the flamethrower still raised, her face illuminated by the inferno. She looked calm, like this was justice in her mind. I didn't wait. I pushed Ethan's wheelchair toward the Lopez's house across the street. Mrs. Lopez burst through her front door, hand covering her mouth in horror. Oh my God, what happened? Call 911. I yelled, breath ragged. She's burning my house. She attacked my son. Mrs. Lopez froze for a second, then ran inside to grab her phone. I could hear sirens in the distance. Maybe someone else had already called. Ethan was shaking uncontrollably. I knelt in front of him, trying to steady my voice. You're okay, sweetheart. You're safe now. Do you hear me? He was crying, his small hands clutching my arms. Why would she do that, Mom? What did I do wrong? My throat closed up. There was no answer that made sense. No reason that could explain the kind of evil I'd just seen. Nothing, baby, I whispered, brushing the soot from his cheek. You did nothing wrong. The fire truck arrived minutes later, but it felt like hours. Red lights flashed across the street, the reflection flickering over the neighbors who had started to gather. People were whispering, gasping, filming. Some were crying. 2 firefighters rushed toward the blaze, shouting commands, dragging hoses. The flames were massive now, devouring everything I'd built, every picture, every memory, every piece of our lives. Police cars screeched to a stop. One officer approached me, his expression tight with disbelief. Ma'am, is anyone else inside? No, I gasped, still coughing. Just us. But she did this. The HOA woman, Karen, she used a flamethrower. He blinked, stunned. And what? I pointed toward the yard. Karen was gone. The only trace of her was the black scorch marks across the grass and the twisted trail of fire leading to where she'd been standing. She ran. Mrs. Lopez said behind me, voice trembling. I saw her drive off right before the police came. The officer's jaw clenched. We'll find her. Another firefighter came over. We've contained it, but the house is almost gone. Almost gone. Those words hit like a blade. I looked past him. The roof had collapsed, smoke rising in thick gray plumes. Our home, the place Ethan grew up in, was reduced to ashes. Ethan was quiet now, his eyes glassy. He held my hand tightly, like if he let go, the world would collapse completely. I hugged him close, my tears mixing with the smoke and ash on his hair. We're okay, I whispered, even though nothing felt okay. I promise we'll get through this. In the distance, the sirens faded. The crowd slowly dispersed. The night settled heavy and silent. But one thought refused to leave my mind. If Karen could do this once, she could do it again. And this time, I wasn't going to let her. The sirens followed us all the way to the hospital. Their echo bounced inside my head, mixing with the smell of smoke still clinging to my hair and clothes. I sat in the back of the ambulance beside Ethan, holding his hand so tight I was afraid I'd hurt him. His face was pale, lashes wet with tears, but his eyes were open. Thank God they were open. The paramedic worked quickly, checking his vitals, applying cool compresses to the burns along his arms. The right side of his chair had melted when I dragged him through the yard. The sight of the warped metal made bile rise in my throat. He's going to be okay, the paramedic said, voice steady calm, like he'd said those words 100 times before. But I could hear the worry behind them. Ethan tried to smile. Mom, my drone, it's gone, right? That broke me. I nodded, brushing his hair back. We'll get another one, baby. 100 if we have to. He laughed weakly, a small sound, fragile but alive. I held onto it like it was the only thing keeping me from falling apart. When we reached St. Mary's, the nurses took him straight to the burn unit. They let me follow until the doors swung shut, leaving me in a white hallway that smelled of antiseptic and fear. My hands were trembling, the skin red from burns I hadn't even noticed. For a long moment, I just stood there, staring at the closed door. My body felt heavy, numb. Then the memories hit me. The fire, Karen's face, the sound of Ethan screaming. It all crashed down at once. I slid to the floor and sobbed. Ma'am. I looked up. A police officer stood beside me. Tall, kind-eyed, his uniform still smelling faintly of smoke. I'm Officer Daniel Hayes, he said. We're doing everything we can to locate the woman responsible. Do you feel up to answering a few questions? I nodded shakily. She's from the HOA. Her name's Karen Williams. She lives 2 streets down, in the White House with a flag on the porch. He jotted it down. We've already sent units to her address. But she wasn't there when we arrived. We did find this. He held up a photo on his phone, the scorched remnants of a metal cylinder. We're confirming, but it looks like a homemade flamethrower. She modified a fuel canister. This wasn't random. I pressed a hand to my mouth. She planned it? He nodded grimly. From what we've gathered, yes. Neighbors mentioned she'd been talking about taking matters into her own hands. Did she ever threaten you directly before today? I thought back. The mailbox incident, the letters, the shouting. Yes, she left notes on our door. She said we were bringing down property values. She once told Ethan not to play outside because he made the neighborhood look unclean. His expression darkened. We'll need those notes, if you still have them. They burned. I whispered. Everything burned. He crouched slightly, lowering his voice. Ma'am, I'm sorry. But I promise she won't get away with this. I wanted to believe him. But in that moment, all I could see was fire. Hours passed before a doctor finally approached. Mrs. Turner? I jumped to my feet. How is he? The doctor gave a tired but gentle smile. Your son's stable. He has second-degree burns on his arms and hands, some smoke inhalation, but no internal damage. You got him out in time. I let out a sob, part relief, part exhaustion. Can I see him? Of course. But he's sedated now. Try to rest while you're with him. When I entered the room, I nearly fell apart all over again. Ethan lay on the bed, his small body wrapped in white bandages, a faint line of oxygen tubing running across his nose. Machines beeped softly beside him, a rhythm that was both terrifying and comforting. I sat down, taking his hand carefully, afraid to touch the burns. "You're my brave boy," I whispered. "My miracle." For a long time, I just stayed there, watching him sleep, listening to the rain that had started to fall outside. The sound was soft, like the world was trying to apologize. That's when my phone buzzed. Unknown number. I hesitated, then answered. "Mrs. Turner," came Officer Hayes's voice. "We found her car abandoned near the river. But there's something else. We recovered her HOA office computer. You might want to come by tomorrow." "Why?" "Because it looks like she's been keeping a file on you. A big one." My stomach dropped. "A file?" "Yes. Photos of your son, surveillance footage from her door cam, letters, weeks' worth. She'd been documenting everything you did, even the time your son was outside for more than allowed hours." I closed my eyes, the world tilting. She was obsessed. "More than obsessed," he said quietly. "This was hatred disguised as order. And we're going to prove it." After I hung up, I looked at Ethan again. The steady beep of the monitor was the only thing anchoring me to reality. My mind kept replaying Karen's face, her eyes when she aimed that weapon, her calmness as fire spread. I wanted justice. No, I needed it. By morning, the story had spread everywhere. HOA woman attacks disabled child with flamethrower flashed across every screen. Reporters camped outside the hospital. Strangers sent flowers and messages. Some said they couldn't believe anyone could do such a thing. Others said they'd had their own Karens too. But none of it felt real. The world could talk, post, tweet, but they hadn't smelled the fire. They hadn't watched their child burn. When Officer Hayes returned the next day, he brought photos, evidence from Karen's computer. I flipped through them with shaking hands. My son's drone, our front yard, the timestamps, each one dated weeks apart, every moment we'd thought was private. And then there was the last one, taken the night before the attack. A blurry photo of my son by the fence. Written beneath it in bold red marker, "Tomorrow, this ends." I dropped the photo. My knees went weak. "She planned it down to the day," Hayes nodded grimly. "We have enough to charge her with attempted murder, arson, and hate crime enhancement. The only problem, she's still missing." I turned toward the hospital window, watching the gray rain streak the glass. Somewhere out there, that woman, that monster, was still free. I squeezed Ethan's hand, whispering to myself, "You started this war, Karen, but I'll finish it." Because no mother forgets the sound of her child scream, and no amount of fire can burn away a mother's will for justice. The days after the fire blurred into one long stretch of sleepless nights and hospital visits. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw flames. Every time a door slammed, my heart jumped. Thinking she had come back to finish what she started, Officer Hayes kept his word. He checked in every morning. Each visit brought more details that made my stomach turn. Karen hadn't just snapped, she had planned. Her computer revealed spreadsheets of every violation I had supposedly committed, from leaving trash cans visible to allowing a handicapped child to create noise pollution. She had timestamps, photos, even maps of the neighborhood with circles and notes like "Watch her in the morning." This wasn't a dispute, Hayes said grimly. It was an obsession. The police had set up roadblocks and distributed her photo across 3 states. Karen's car had been found near a rest stop, but she had disappeared into the woods before officers arrived. For days, there were no sightings. But deep down, I knew she wasn't gone. Monsters like her don't just vanish, they wait. Ethan had started to heal, but the emotional scars were harder to treat. He woke up screaming some nights, shouting her name. The doctors said it was trauma. That time and therapy would help. But every time I held him through those nightmares, I silently promised, "She will never touch you again." Then, on the 5th day, everything changed. It was early morning when my phone buzzed. Unknown number. Mrs. Turner, Hayes's voice came through, urgent. We found her. My stomach flipped. Where? She broke into a property on Willow Creek Road, an old HOA office. We're surrounding the building now. We need you to stay put. But I couldn't. Something inside me refused to just sit there. Before he could stop me, I was already grabbing my coat and running for the car. The drive felt endless. The rain beat down against the windshield, the wipers thudding in rhythm with my heartbeat. When I arrived, the entire street was sealed off with flashing red and blue lights. Officers crouched behind vehicles, weapons drawn. The smell of wet pavement mixed with the memory of smoke still clinging to my jacket. Ma'am, you can't be here, an officer barked, but Hayes spotted me and waved him off. She's barricaded herself inside, he said quickly. We've tried talking her down, but she's unstable. Keeps shouting about the neighborhood, about purity and rules. She's not responding to reason. As if on cue, a voice erupted from inside the building, shrill, cracked, and full of madness. You can't arrest me. I am the law here. I built this community. I kept it clean. The officers froze. Hayes exhaled sharply. She's completely gone. I stared at the office, its once pristine walls now cracked and stained, the HOA's logo half burned from where she'd torched her own files. She doesn't get to hide behind her madness, I said, quietly. She needs to face what she did. He looked at me for a long moment, then nodded. Stay behind me. The SWAT team breached the door, shouting commands. The crack of boots echoed through the hallway. I followed a few steps behind, my heart pounding so loud I could barely hear their voices. Inside, papers littered the floor. Binders, receipts, letters, all covered in red ink. Words like filth, rules broken, and remove them were scrawled across every page. It looked less like an office and more like the mind of a lunatic laid bare. And there she was. Karen stood in the center of the room, soaked, her once perfect uniform now torn and smeared with soot. In her shaking hands, she held a lighter and a small gas can. Her eyes found mine immediately, cold, sharp, but hollow. You, she hissed. You ruined everything. I froze. Hayes raised his voice calmly. Karen, put down. Nobody else has to get hurt. She ignored him. Her gaze never left me. You brought filth into my neighborhood. That boy of yours, always out there, ruining the view. People like you destroy everything decent. My voice cracked, but I stood my ground. He's a child, Karen. A kind, innocent child who did nothing to you. He broke the rules, she spat. Rules keep the world in order. Without them, everything burns. Hayes took a slow step forward. Karen, listen to me. You're not well. Put the lighter down. Her hand trembled. No one listens to me anymore. They laughed at me at the meetings, said I was crazy. But I kept this place perfect. The rain outside grew louder, hammering against the roof like a drum. I took a breath, my anger breaking through the fear. Perfect? You call burning a child perfect? You think order gives you the right to destroy lives? For the first time, her expression faltered. Confusion flashed in her eyes, then despair. She looked down at her shaking hands, as if realizing the monster she had become. But then she snapped. Her voice rose, desperate and wild. It's not my fault. You made me do it. She lifted the lighter, but before she could ignite it, Hayes lunged. The officers tackled her to the ground, the gas can spilling harmlessly across the floor. The lighter clattered away, extinguished. Karen screamed, thrashing as they cuffed her. You'll see. They'll all see. I was right. I stood frozen, every muscle locked. When it was over, Hayes turned toward me. It's done, he said softly. She's under arrest. I felt the weight of months, years, lift off my chest. My knees gave out, and Hayes caught me before I hit the floor. It's over, he repeated. You and Ethan are safe now. Safe. The word sounded foreign. As they dragged Karen out in handcuffs, our eyes met one last time. There was no remorse in hers, only emptiness. I realized then that I would never get an apology, never hear her say she was sorry. Some people were too far gone for redemption. The news spread quickly. HOA leader arrested in flamethrower attack. The photos showed her being led into a police car, hair disheveled, eyes hollow. For once, the entire neighborhood saw what she truly was. That night, I sat beside Ethan's bed, watching him sleep peacefully for the first time in days. His small chest rose and fell steady and calm. The nightmares would take time to fade, but we were healing slowly, painfully, but together. I looked out the hospital window, the moon reflecting on the wet streets. Somewhere out there, the ashes of our home still lingered, but the fire that once destroyed us had also forged something stronger, a resolve. No matter how deep the hatred, no matter how cruel the world becomes, love will always burn brighter. 6 months later, the courthouse stood like a monument to everything we had survived. The marble floors gleamed, the air heavy with silence and judgment. I sat in the front row beside Officer Hayes, my hands clenched around the strap of my purse, trying to keep them from shaking. Ethan sat behind me in his wheelchair, his arms still marked faintly with scars that told the story words never could. The case had drawn national attention. News crews lined the courthouse steps, reporters whispering updates into microphones as if covering a war. In a way, they were. This was a war between justice and insanity, between a woman's cruelty and a mother's will to see her son's pain mean something. When they brought Karen in, the room went silent. She looked smaller now, her royal blue HOA jacket replaced with a dull, gray jumpsuit. Her one straight posture was hunched, her hair limp, her eyes dark, but still full of that same cold detachment. For a second, our eyes met, and I felt that old fire rise inside me again. The prosecutor, a sharp woman named Denise Clark, stood and began. Ladies and gentlemen of the jury, what you are about to hear is not a neighborhood dispute. It is the story of obsession, of hatred so deep that it consumed an entire family's peace. The defendant, Karen Williams, weaponized her authority to torment, isolate, and ultimately attack an innocent child. Karen's lawyer, a thin man who looked exhausted, countered that she was mentally unstable, that years of stress, loss, and medication imbalance had driven her to a psychotic break. But as the evidence played, the photos, the notes, the video footage of her ranting in HOA meetings, that defense began to crumble. They showed the jury her final message on her HOA computer, written just hours before the attack. If no one else will protect this community, I will. My throat tightened as the prosecutor turned toward me. Mrs. Turner, please take the stand. I walked slowly to the witness box. The weight of every step felt heavier than the last. The bailiff swore me in, and as I sat down, I caught a glimpse of Ethan, his small hands folded, his eyes filled with quiet strength. Mrs. Turner, Denise began gently, "Can you tell the court what happened that morning?" I nodded, forcing the words out between trembling lips. I told them everything, the sunlight, the laughter, the smell of honeysuckle. How peace had turned into hellfire in seconds. How Karen had stood there, calm, watching my son burn. Every detail felt like a knife reopening an old wound. When I finished, the courtroom was silent. Even the judge looked shaken. Karen's lawyer rose for cross-examination. "Mrs. Turner," he began softly, "you've endured an unimaginable trauma. But do you believe my client truly intended to kill your son, or was she acting in a state of mental illness?" I met his eyes steady. "Sir, I don't know what was in her mind that day, but I know what was in her eyes. Hate. Cold, deliberate hate. She wasn't out of control. She was enjoying her control." Gasps rippled through the courtroom. The lawyer hesitated, then lowered his head. No further questions. When I stepped down, I could feel the weight lift slightly, not gone, but lighter. Then came the moment no one expected. The defense called Karen to testify. She walked slowly to the stand, her chains clinking faintly. Her face was pale, but her eyes darted around the room, sharp and calculating. "Ms. Williams," the judge said, "you may speak if you wish." She smiled faintly, a small, eerie curve of her lips. "I kept that neighborhood beautiful," she began, her voice quiet but firm. "I followed the rules. Everyone else got lazy. They painted their houses wrong colors, left trash cans out, ruined everything I built. And that boy, don't I whispered under my breath, gripping the bench. That boy, she continued, was always there. The sound of that drone, the ramp, the noise, it never stopped. You people don't understand how much noise hurts. It's chaos. It spreads. Someone had to stop it. The prosecutor shot up. Ms. Williams, are you admitting that you intentionally used a flamethrower on a child? Karen looked at her like she was the crazy one. I didn't mean to hurt him, she said, though her tone was detached. I meant to teach a lesson. Maybe then they'd listen. The courtroom erupted. Gasps, murmurs, shouts. The judge slammed his gavel. Order. But I couldn't stay quiet anymore. I stood. A lesson? My voice broke. You call burning my child a lesson? Karen turned her head toward me, eyes narrowing. He shouldn't have been outside. I told you that. Rules are rules. Something inside me snapped. Rules don't make you human, Karen. Compassion does. And that's something you never had. The judge motioned for me to sit, but I couldn't tear my eyes away from her. She stared back, emotionless like a void. After that, the trial moved fast. The jury deliberated for less than 2 hours. When they returned, the foreman's voice was clear. We, the jury, find the defendant, Karen Williams, guilty of attempted murder, arson, and aggravated assault with a hate crime enhancement. The courtroom burst into quiet sobs, applause, and sighs of relief. I felt Ethan's arms wrap around me from behind, his small voice whispering, "We won, Mom." Tears streamed down my face as I whispered back, "No, baby, we survived." The judge looked at Karen. You have caused unimaginable harm, not just to this family, but to every community that trusted people like you. You will spend the rest of your life behind bars. For the first time, Karen's mask cracked. Her lips trembled, eyes darting wildly as the reality set in. You can't. I was protecting my home. The judge's gavel came down like thunder. Sentence: life imprisonment without parole. She screamed as the guards took her away, but her voice was swallowed by the noise of justice finally being served. Outside, the press swarmed us. Cameras flashed, questions flew. How do you feel? What message do you have for other parents? I looked at the sea of faces and said, no law, no rule, no title gives anyone the right to destroy a child's happiness. My son was born to shine, and no fire, no hatred will ever take that away. Ethan smiled, holding my hand tightly as we left the courthouse. The sun was setting, casting a warm golden glow over the city. For the first time since that awful day, the light didn't hurt, it healed. And in that moment, I realized something powerful. Sometimes justice isn't just about punishment. It's about reclaiming peace, about proving that love, even burned, broken, and scarred, will always rise again. Months passed after the verdict, yet the echoes of that courtroom still lingered in my mind. Some nights, I could still hear the judge's gavel, the sound of Karen's voice fading into nothing as they took her away. But life, as broken as it was, had begun to rebuild itself, slowly, quietly, like grass pushing through ashes. Our new house wasn't as big as the old one, but it was peaceful. The yard had no fences, no HOA rules, no watchful eyes judging how we lived. Just open space, sunlight, and the steady laughter of a boy rediscovering what happiness felt like. Ethan had a new wheelchair now, sleek silver light, and one morning, he told me he wanted to go outside and play again. Are you sure, sweetheart? I asked gently, kneeling beside him. He nodded, eyes shining. Yeah, I'm not scared anymore. The words hit me harder than he could ever know. I watched him roll into the yard, the breeze brushing his hair, the drone buzzing softly above him. His laughter filled the air, not haunted or hesitant, just free. I sat on the porch, tears slipping down my face. Not tears of pain this time, but of gratitude. My son was alive, and the monster who tried to destroy that light would never hurt anyone again. Officer Hayes visited sometimes, still in his uniform but with a softer expression now. Neighborhood's different without her, he said once, sipping coffee at our porch table. People are kinder. The HOA dissolved. They said they couldn't look at that place the same way again. I smiled faintly. Maybe that's the point. Maybe it needed to burn down, so something better could grow. He nodded. We've had letters from other families, people who went through similar things. You started something, Mrs. Turner. I looked at Ethan playing in the sunlight and said quietly, he did. He's the reason we all kept fighting. The world hadn't forgotten our story. News anchors called it the HOA Inferno case. Documentaries came out, podcasts analyzed every detail. But I didn't care about fame. I cared about the letters that started arriving in the mail, messages from parents, strangers, even former HOA members who admitted they'd turned a blind eye to cruelty for the sake of rules. One letter from a man in Arizona read, "My daughter has cerebral palsy. We were shamed for installing a ramp. Your courage gave us the strength to stand up. Thank you." Another said, "I used to be an HOA president. I thought rules mattered more than compassion. Not anymore. You made me see what really counts." Every word healed something inside me. Each envelope was like a small spark of light reclaiming what fire had taken. One afternoon, Ethan asked if we could visit the old neighborhood. I hesitated at first. The memories there were sharp, heavy, but he was determined. "I just want to see it," he said softly. So we went. The place was unrecognizable. The charred remains of our house had been cleared, and wildflowers grew where the yard once was. The fence line had vanished, replaced by a small memorial plaque. Someone, maybe the new owners, maybe a neighbor, had placed it there. It read, "In memory of every child who was told they didn't belong, may kindness always win." I knelt beside it, running my fingers over the engraved words. "Do you remember the spot?" I asked. Ethan smiled. "Yeah. It used to be where I crashed my drone into Mrs. Wilkins's roses." I laughed, the sound shaking away the last bit of darkness. "You were always a terrible pilot." We stayed there for a long time, just watching the sunlight dance over the grass. The wind was gentle, the sky impossibly blue. And for the first time, the place that had once felt like a nightmare finally felt peaceful. That night, as I tucked Ethan into bed, he asked, "Mom, do you think she ever feels sorry?" I paused, brushing a strand of hair from his forehead. "Maybe," I said softly, "but even if she doesn't, that's not our burden to carry anymore. Forgiveness doesn't mean forgetting, it just means we choose peace over hate." He nodded sleepily. "I like peace better." I kissed his forehead. "Me too, baby." After he fell asleep, I went out to the porch again. The night was cool, the stars scattered across the sky like tiny embers. I thought about everything we'd lost and everything we'd gained. Pain had tried to destroy us, but it had also revealed the unbreakable truth. Love, when tested by fire, only grows stronger. I turned on the camera one last time. To everyone watching, I began, my voice steady. "You've heard our story, but this isn't just about us. It's about every family that's been silenced, judged, or broken by cruelty disguised as order. If you see something wrong, speak up. Don't wait for tragedy to make you brave." My son survived because someone called for help, because people chose to act. And today, he's not a victim, he's a survivor. Comment below where you're watching from. Tell me if you've ever stood up for someone who needed it. Let's build a community that protects love, not power. Because no matter how dark the world gets, compassion will always burn brighter than hate. The camera blinked off, the silence wrapping around me like a warm blanket. I looked at the empty sky above and whispered, "We did it, Ethan. We made it through the fire." From the window, I could see him sleeping peacefully, his small chest rising and falling. And I knew, deep in my bones, that we weren't just survivors. We were proof. Proof that love, even scarred and fragile, can outlive flames. Proof that justice, no matter how late, always finds its way home. And proof that sometimes the worst fire doesn't destroy you. It forges you. If you felt this story, take 1 second right now, comment your city below, and tell me, have you ever seen hate disguised as rules? Don't just scroll past. Share this story, because someone out there needs to be reminded that justice can win. And if you believe that kindness is stronger than cruelty, hit that subscribe button. Let's make sure no child, no family, ever faces another Karen alone again. Because this isn't just my story, it's a warning, a promise, and a fight for every voice that's ever been silenced.